We live in an amazing time. And while we focus on Doge, and yes, that's important, and while we focus on the Trump reforms and the attempts to block him, there's other things lying beneath the surface that we have done shows on that have largely gone ignored. And I'm going to circle back and I'm going to talk about some of these things, but in a different light. And I can't do this in one presentation. I'm going to do it in multiple presentations over a period of time, but we may get interrupted by the events that will come from what I'm going to talk about and render this series moot and unimportant. Right now, this is the most important thing on the planet, other than the salvation of individual souls, which is a decision one has to make when they come to Jesus. Other than that, this is the most important item that's out there because it's guiding history. The elite know what I'm going to tell you. I believe Trump and Musk know what I'm going to tell you. I'm sure the Chinese know what I'm going to tell you. And certain people in the Philippines, Hawaii, and Mount Shasta have told me they know what I'm going to tell you is correct. And I've had these discussions over time, and so have my colleagues. And you're saying, colleagues, you have colleagues in this nutty story you're going to tell us? Yes, I do. Sarah Westall has a big part of what I know. Chris Kitsy, the developer of Private Line, who has an interesting high-tech background, he has a lot of this information. And as a consequence, ladies and gentlemen, there are other people that I've talked to, the Hawaiian elders, when I got involved in what happened to Lahaina. And if you think the only thing in Maui was Lahaina, the destruction, the creation of a 15-minute city, that is the surface explanation for what they really want there. Many of the Hawaiian elders know this. And in fact, I'm going to have discussions with a couple other people I've come to trust who've investigated Lahaina as well. But there are events that have happened there in the ancient past that still loom large today and known by a few. And this is a lot of this stuff is compartmentalized. And if you know how the world of intelligence works, the way that they hold their secrets is to do what? Come on, they compartmentalize it, correct? And by compartmentalizing, one person may know part A, next person knows part B, but they don't know each other. Part C, part D. My father went through this when he did his work with captured German scientists. He would see things that would disappear off into the ethos, never to cross his desk again, nor the people to cross his desk again. And he knew how this game was played, but he wondered why it never showed up in NASA. And he said, well, there must be a secret space program where this stuff is going on. And he's proven to be exactly right. And he told me that in 1985. Oh, gee, how long is that? That's 40 years ago. People have pieces of this pie. Some people have larger pieces than other. I would say Sarah Westall and the Hawaiian elders that I've talked to at some length have the biggest piece along with Chris Kitsy. And I've taken what they have done. And it's kind of like a blind man describing an elephant. What's an elephant? Well, it's got a long, long something coming out of the front of its face. And it's absolutely huge and its legs are thick. So, depending on where you're located, you describe the elephant a little differently as a blind person than someone who could see the whole thing or from someone who's compartmentalized in a different part of the elephant. This is what I have tried to do is to connect the dots on these compartmentalizations by talking to many people who have proven they know what they talk about. And I will tell you, Sarah's research on this and Chris's research on this has crossed over that boundary. And I'm going to have another discussion today, later today, with someone who I suspect knows a lot more than they've told me. And I think I'm going to be shocking them. Anyway, I'm Dave Hodges. This is the Common Sense Show. We are the show that is freeing America one enslaved mind at a time. And I'm going to tell you right up front right now, I'm going to give you surface explanations, but if you want details, I'm going to put some of those details over on our TV show, the commonsenseshow.tv. You want to go there and sign up, and we're going to put a lot of this exclusive stuff up there. The connector dots are going to go up there. I'm going to give you the broad story today, and I'll be following up with more broad story connections. But the stuff you can go research and begin to piece this together as I have will be over on the TV show. And we're going to make that exclusive to that entity. Um, Let me mention a name to you here that surfaced, and he's getting attention, but they're not going to the end level of how this affects us today with this guy. There's hidden history. There's the ancient continent of Atlantis. There is the ancient continent of what was called Mu, or the civilization Lemuria. And a man named J.C. Brown began to connect all this. And I'm just going to tell you a brief story. And this is circulating on the internet. This isn't proprietary here, and this isn't proprietary to any of my sources that I'm drawing from. And this man had an interesting ending, too. But he was a geologist for a mining company. He was sent to Mount Shasta to look for gold. Well, he found a lot more than that. Now, Mount Shasta, as you know, is a volcano. And so they're going to have lava tubes that are miles long. Well, he cleared some debris and he found probably what was a lava tube, miles long. And he got into it and says he found an ancient city. And the city contains some very big anomalies. And I don't know how much of this is true or folklore that, well, basically arrived or was derived from his explanation. But he described like spiritual rooms with 7 to 10 foot encased beings that were humanoid, but didn't look totally human. And he talked about machinery that was gold plated, other things that were gold plated. This will become very, very important. Remember the excessive description of gold by J.C. Brown. Well, he didn't know what to do with it. He kind of freaked out and he said, well, there's no gold at Mount Shasta, and told his mining company that. And he had the debris that he had removed from the opening of the lava tube covered, and he buried the city. And well, a few years later, he came across a work of a man who wrote a book on Lemuria, ancient continent destroyed, sunk to the bottom of the ocean. And he got fascinated with this and started to give lectures about what he had found. And he was going to lead an expedition back to where he was going to go, or where he had been, I should say, remove the debris and expose to the world what he said he knew was true. And he mysteriously disappeared the night before. And this made the headlines in California newspapers. Mount Shasta, as you know, is in Northern California. And this made headlines all across the region. What happened to this guy? Extensive legal searches were performed. Never a body, not a suicide note, nothing. Never was found. And J.C. Brown disappeared forever. Now, I'm going to lead up to something here, and you got to stay with me on this. And I'm going to tell you right now that, we have to pay for what we do here. And so I just want to tell you we're brought to you by, we're brought to you by the company that makes this product. You see me display the Nanosoma spray, boost my immune system, allowed me to get over a lot of stuff I was dealing with, bad stuff. And then I used what I just flashed on the screen there, the gel that would allow me to work out to recapture a lot of my health, but overcome, basically debilitated joints over time, such as bone on bone right knee, which is no longer the case. And these products really have put me to where I've been, and I haven't been doing what I'm doing for 25 years. I mean, I even occasionally play basketball now at my advanced age, taking a risk, I know, with the ACL and stuff, but the joint, no problem. Used to be very quick. Now you can time me with a calendar, but I can still shoot. But I get to enjoy that activity that I thought was long behind me because of these products. But I do other things too. And it's just not just the sports aspect, it's the health aspect of it. And the spray does not cure anything. It just boosts your immune system to unbelievable levels. And if you go to iwantmyhealthback.com/Dave Hodges, iwantmyhealthback.com/Dave Hodges, you're going to find product descriptions that will tell you exactly why I've drawn the conclusions I've drawn in relationship to my own rehabilitation. All right. Atlantis and Lemuria. I want to focus on the conflict, but then I want to focus mostly on Lemuria for this part. We're going to do many parts on this. Atlantis and Lemuria were the two dominant civilizations on Earth, and we don't know how long ago. I suspect they both have things to do with the pyramids. Lemuria would be pretty much Mount Shasta to Hawaii to the Philippines, roughly speaking, Japan, and so forth. And one of the monuments of Lemuria that we can put our hands on is Yamaguni. And Yamaguni, you just look this up, Yamaguni, it's off the coast of Japan near Okinawa. This is an amazing set of pyramids and apparently roads and structures. And you have block construction with right angle, 45-degree angle cuts. Nature doesn't work that way. And it's the bottom of the ocean. And from what I've researched, I'm convinced this is a remnant of Lemuria. On the other side of the planet, you've got an underground city that's been found off the coast of Cuba. Now, you never get the mainstream media to popularize this. In fact, they debunk everything connected to this. It's ancient legend, it's nonsense, da 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 da. The media is a bunch of liars. I mean, they debunked the work of Tesla, which we still don't know the full extent of what he did because the FBI has those files. Oh, there's a place for Doge to go, isn't it? Hidden technology. I'm going to do another piece on that someday about what Dan Bongino and Kash Patel can go look for because I'd be happy to tell them. Okay, now continuing with this lost city of Atlantis lies 2 miles deep at the bottom of the ocean, and you see the similar constructions that you find in Yonaguni, and then you have the Bienemy Road off the Bahamas, and it's clear it's a road. I mean, just nature doesn't work in 90-degree, 45-degree angles consistently. It's random. So you have artifacts of Atlantis, Lemuria. I think it could be likely, and I haven't gone in to explore this fully, with the ancient pyramid structure. And some of these cities that you find underwater have ancient pyramids. And the pyramids may be connected to these two civilizations that existed simultaneously. Well, they went to war with each other. Atlantis was a virtuous society, as the legend goes, written by Plato, and they became corrupt about 25 to 30,000 years ago. And they started to wage war on Lemuria because they wanted to be the dominant planet. Lemuria wouldn't give in. And Lemuria held a lot of the gold on this planet, as the legend goes, and Atlantis wanted their cut. And the Lemurians said, no way. And so they had this massive war, and as legend goes, and I'll give you a piece of artifact proof here in a second, but as the legend grew about this story, they waged war for years with selective nuclear strikes and other weapons that are very Tesla-like, sound-based, directed energy. This is nothing new that we're having today. And in fact, let me just share this artifact with you as I digress to a right turn. How long have I known about this stuff? I've known about it for over 30 years. When I was lucky enough through my mentor, Bill Pollock, former CIA, ex-Air Force Intel, the late Bill Pollock, who is really my mentor in this business, Bill introduced me to Vance Davis, former NSA, and really interesting background. And Vance and I used to have weekly meetings when I lived in Glendale, Arizona, and he lived in Mesa, Arizona. We would meet every Saturday, and we did this for quite some time and share information about what I knew from my father's work that I could not disclose publicly for many reasons at that time. And then he would share with me classified work that could have got him killed had he come out. Now, eventually things will change, and I've somewhat told my story of my family background, not fully, and there's good reasons for it, but he has pretty much come full disclosure. And what we learned from each other was about ancient civilizations, technology that was sought. In fact, Hitler was obsessed with finding ancient technology in the pyramids, and they created the Muslim Brotherhood. In fact, the most popular book today with the Muslim Brotherhood through the Middle East is Mein Kampf, believe that or not. And they were looking for ancient technology to aid in military application. That was Hitler, but we have done a lot of that. Now, Vance and I, he took me into downtown Phoenix and he said, there's ancient technology that lies under the city of Phoenix. And he says this is why they built the Federal Center there. And it's just very mysterious. And I won't go into all the details. It's another story I'll tell in more detail. But Vance told me, he said, we can't touch the technology because it's biometrically operated. And I said, give me an example of what we'd find. And so we had lunch in downtown Phoenix on top of this rotating restaurant. And underneath there, and if you're from Phoenix, you know exactly where I'm talking about probably about three-quarters of a mile from where the Diamondbacks and the Suns play baseball and basketball respectively. And Vance said, underneath us are these craft. And I've had this confirmed from Hopi elders that I have talked to. They called them the Searcherins, was a name that they had given to them. And then under the Federal Center that lies out on the the west side of downtown, as you approach I-17, near the I-10 corridor, you have the same thing. And they built the Federal Center where they did so they could build underground tunnels to go explore and try to develop. And the latest information that we have is they haven't mastered this or not. It's just continued to be a mystery. Ancient technology superior to our own. Now, I'm going to bring this directly into focus to current events. I want to focus mostly on Lemuria. They were the holders of gold in this time. Hawaiian elders have this information too. Hawaii was part of that Lemurian group that survived. Mount Shasta seems to have been the western end. And with Mount Shasta, you've got stories of people disappearing. I mean, hikers going across an open field and someone just goes away. It's very, very mysterious. The Bigfoot legend was born there, and some people say it's not Bigfoot, it's Lemurians that survived and exist there. And the ancient Native American tribes, and I've interviewed some of them, will tell you you don't go above the tree line on Mount Shasta because there's beings there that will meet you with extreme hostility. It's part of the folklore. How much of that is true, I really don't know. But it all adds up to a consistent theme that the Lemurians seem to have fled to Mount Shasta and centered their what remained of their civilization there after the nuclear wars that they were having with Atlantis unhinged the tectonic plates, massive floods destroyed both civilizations, and you had remnants of survivors. It's really one of what the Hopis call the four lost civilizations. They say we're in the fifth and final world. It's part of their legend. And how do I know? Well, I had a student who was the grandson of a Hopi elder, and I got the privilege of being downloaded on this information. Now, let's put all this in a block and set it to the side. This is a part one of a series that I'm going to tell you why President Trump, Elon Musk, the banks of the world, the Bank of International Settlement, the most powerful bank in the world that controls all the central banks, and JP Morgan, Wells Fargo, Bank of America, all the big ones are now totally 100% after gold. The Bank of London's being emptied with demands for gold that they were storing for the banks and the elite. They're playing games now. What used to be a one-day transfer, actually a 5-minute transfer, now taking weeks because they feel something big is coming and they're hoping for intervention. The Bank of London people are, because they want to hang on to as much gold as possible. Gold is ready to surface. This is the motivation for the BRICS at the elite level. Your average person working in BRICS and trying to align gold with currency, blending that among 40 different nations, they probably have no idea. Remember what I said, compartmentalization. And I'd be compartmentalized had I not gone to so many different sources over the last 30 years, but things have mushroomed in the last 6 months. Sarah and I did a show I'm going to review that show with you in part two. And it tells you how ancient Atlantis, mostly Lemuria, enters into our history today. And it's not that if there's any surviving Atlanteans or surviving Lemurians that we're going to have interface with them and somehow things are going to change. I have no idea if that's true or even possible. I have no idea, but I can tell you what was left behind is stunning. And we're going to hit this in part two, our hidden history that's ready to visit the effects upon us today. We are at a major turning point in history. And when I take a 30,000-foot view, I can see how the World Health Organization enters into this, the United Nations, but mostly the World Economic Forum. They know what I know, and I can tell by their policies. And they act like they're descendants of Atlantis with their arrogant attitude. I'm not saying they are. I'm saying they act like it. We're going to cover that and more in part two of this series. I'm Dave Hodges. You're watching the Common Sense Show. Sign up for our newsletter. You go, well, what do you mean newsletter? Well, if you go to thecommonsenseshow.com, in the upper right-hand corner, there's a link for the newsletter. You click it on, you put your email address in, the only required field, and you'll be tuned into everything we've done in the previous 24 hours. It's one-stop shopping. We typically have anywhere between 5 and 7 publications per day. Most are videos from me. Some are articles interesting that are written by other people. Some have been written by me. And it's a combination of everything we put in there. And we usually build the newsletter on themes. And people love it because they don't have to come back 4 or 5 times in the day to keep up on the latest. They just wait for the newsletter, and there it is. Voila. And we're going to be expanding that too because the Doug and Dave Intel Report is going to a more frequent publication. And this is by popular demand. And I've actually had people that work on selling advertising, like on YouTube and other places, tell me, Dave, your podcast is in, the upper one half of 1%, according to Listen Notes, that rates 3.5 million worldwide. But you know what the best thing you do in your podcast? It's the Doug and Dave Intel Report. Doug Thornton, if you don't know who he is a former combat Marine defense contractor and DHS supervisor. Has been on the border, fought Antifa in Portland, dealt with a corrupt DOJ with Merrick Garland before he couldn't take anymore and he quit and went into this business. And we combined forces to have the Doug and Dave Intel Report. That's going to be a growing element of what we do, both on Doug's side with the American Vindicta Show and my side, the Common Sense Show. So this is an exciting time, and I feel real pressure to get this information out because I think we're going to realize the fruits of this information very shortly. I mean, could be tomorrow, could be next week, could be this summer. I don't think we have 2 years. I really don't. I don't think we have a year. But predicting dates and how events will roll out that cascade upon each other is a fool's errand. But I just get the sense of urgency to get this done. And Art Bell talked about this concept towards the end of his broadcast career. Art used to talk about the quickening. The things were accelerating and we were coming to certain climaxes in various areas. Art was right. Art was right. Things indeed are speeding up. And there's actually a reason that's scientific behind this that we'll cover in another presentation. Anyway, thank you for joining us. Stay tuned for part two in the next segment of this series, Our Hidden History. And we're going to soon be living it.